Barrett, when you hear that Colin Kaepernick has a new Ben and Jerry's ice cream flavor, do you think this is exactly what Martin Luther King Jr. would have done? This is what Mahatma Gandhi would have done when they were becoming civil rights icons? That they would be like, hey, you know what I need to further advance my cause? A ice cream?
My first thought is, man, capitalism is a great thing, right?
I don't know if anybody's ever made more money hating America than Colin Kaepernick. I mean, in all honesty, can you think of someone who has spent more time saying America is an awful place and gotten fabulously rich doing it? Any other country in the world, almost, if you did that, you, one, wouldn't make money. Two, in many of the countries in the world, including Cuba, which, you know, our boy Kaepernick praised Fidel Castro and said he was amazing. If you criticize the country, you get put in prison and or killed, and no one ever hears from you again. In many of the socialist countries that Colin Kaepernick idolizes, that's what would happen. And here, thanks to capitalism, he's getting fabulously wealthy off hating America.
Well, I want to know what kind of flavor. I mean, look, ice cream's great. I need to know where it lies in the scale, right?
I can tell you.
I'm vehemently anti-mint chocolate chip, and so that's my bar. Like that all ice cream's good, but mint chocolate chip is my bar, whether it's good or not. So I need to know first.
First of all, the cover art is Colin Kaepernick holding up his fist, like in the Black Power sign. So this is just, I mean, even for people who are woke, they have to be like, seeing someone sell out to such an extent on a freaking ice cream carton, it has to be the height of stupidity. Now, I will say this. It doesn't actually sound like a bad flavor, all right? Colin Kaepernick's Ben & Jerry's Black Power ice cream has caramel with fudge chips, graham cracker swirls, and chocolate cookie swirls. So that sounds like it actually doesn't sound like a bad ice cream. Now, I still don't understand what a non-dairy frozen dessert is, but I am intrigued to see how Colin Kaepernick's changed the world. And by the way, world is spelled like world, like a mix, WHIRLED, right, as opposed to the world.
Well, I think that has to be, that you have to market it like in a variety of different ways, right? So at that point, you're dealing with the English majors. Yeah.
So that is where we are in America. That is pretty crazy. All right. So we're talking to Barrett Sallee, who is a college football expert and writer in Atlanta. Update. First of all, also, as we talk about the Colin Kaepernick ice cream situation, how are the television advertisements in the Georgia Senate race going? Are they growing? Can they possibly grow any more than they already are? Do they peter out a little bit as we move closer to Christmas? What's your analysis on the Senate campaign?
Well, no, they're evolving. They're evolving from having one advertisement per candidate during every commercial break to now they've combined their power. So we're having joint Warnock-Ossoff commercials. We're having joint Loeffler and Purdue commercials. So instead of, I'm John Ossoff and I approve this message, it's John Ossoff saying, I'm John Ossoff, and then Reverend Warnock saying, and I'm Raphael Warnock, and we approve this message. And it's coming from both sides. So that way you get 4 commercials in a commercial break, and you get double the value.
Yeah.
Because now you have more of the candidates coming at you in a variety of different ways. So we've evolved from, for each individual getting a 30-second spot per break to now joint commercials. And I don't even know what it's going to be after that.
We're talking to Barrett Sallee. That's a good update. All right, let's dive into college football. Did it surprise you at all that the Big Ten changed the rules to ensure that Ohio State was in the Big Ten title game?
No, it didn't, because for somebody in Kevin Warren and the presidents of the Big Ten to be so inept through all of this, they finally figured out how to do something right. Now, they did it way too late, but they did something right, because we looked at these protocols, and I was on your show when this stuff was announced. You had a season with no built-in bye weeks and a 21-day contact tracing ban of players. You have to sit for 21 days, which is 14 days more than the CDC recommendation. It didn't make any sense then. So finally, Kevin Warren figured out, and the presidents figured out, that they're idiots, and the rules they made before the season that were designed to try to win a PR battle more than create a competitive conference were dumb, and were going to cost their conference a ton of money. And so money dictates all, and they tried to find a way to get Ohio State in. Now, honestly, and I've said this for weeks, it does not really matter, because in this, like, the committee, part of the criteria for the committee is conference championships. It's a minor part of the criteria anyway in the minds of those people, generally speaking, because a lot of times divisions are based on geography, and you're not really getting your best teams in. So conference championships, I think, were not part of the big part of the selection process anyway. So when you put in a screwy season where Ohio State might get 6 games, and some other team, USC, might get 5, and some Cincinnati might get 12, you're not going to factor in conference championships anyway. Like, it's just common sense. You're not going to do that. So does it really matter that Ohio State beats Northwestern in the Big Ten championship game rather than, I don't know, Wisconsin on championship Saturday in some weird third-place game? Not really. I don't think it matters all that much.
Do you expect, like right now, I think it's fair to say there are only 6 teams that are really in the mix for the college football playoff: Florida, Alabama, Texas A&M, Clemson, Notre Dame, and Ohio State. 4 of those 6 are going to go. I would be very surprised if they don't. The only way I see Ohio State, assuming they beat Northwestern, not going, would be if Florida beats Alabama and then Clemson beats Notre Dame, because then I think those 4 teams would get in. Do you agree with that analysis in general?
In general, yeah. You'd have to talk style points at that point, and how emphatic those wins are on Championship Saturday. Because let's just say Clemson just absolutely annihilates Notre Dame. You'd be talking about a one-loss Notre Dame, which obviously played itself into a spot to have that loss in the conference championship game.
Yeah, 10-1 Notre Dame
against 6-0. Would be 6-0. Be
6-0 Ohio State. 6-0.
6-0. That's right. 6-0 Ohio State. That's tough.
See, I think Notre Dame would get in, because if you looked, I think that's where the number of games played factor would start to become significant.
Probably, yeah.
Because Notre Dame would have played 11, almost twice the number of games that Ohio State has, and they lost a championship game against a team that they already beat. Now, granted, Trevor Lawrence is back, but I mean, maybe things would change if they lost 45-3 and that was the last lasting image. But I don't think that's going to happen to Notre Dame. And maybe things would change, obviously, in these games if you had an injury to an Ian Book or to a Mac Jones. Let's say Florida won and Mac Jones got knocked out for the season. I think those kind of things, you had a Tua-like injury to a star quarterback, same thing, Kyle Trask. Honestly, same thing, Justin Fields, right? Like if Ohio State went out and beat Northwestern, but Justin Fields had a season-ending injury, then I think it would be hard to argue, Ohio State deserves to go.
Yeah, and then I think, and I think for Ohio State too, their defense hasn't been that great, so style points matter for them a lot. If their defense continues to be average at best, then they're really putting themselves in a tough spot, because style points matter for them way more than anybody else. So, it would get messy. I tend to agree with you that, it would take Notre Dame getting absolutely annihilated and then Ohio State just looking pretty impressive. And then I could see it. I mean, I'm not saying it's impossible, but in that scenario, you'd have 2 ACC and 2 SEC.
How do we set up the Heisman Trophy race? because Kyle Trask numbers are through the roof. Mac Jones is posting really outstanding numbers, but Devontae Smith is also fantastic, his top wide receiver. Do you think the Alabama votes could end up getting mixed together? Do you buy into it being Mac Jones versus Kyle Trask and everybody else is left behind? How would you assess the Heisman Trophy race as we come into the next to last weekend of the regular season?
Well, I tell you, we haven't gotten our Heisman ballot yet, and they frown upon us talking about it or talking about our rankings. But I tell you right now, I'd put Devontae Smith number one.
You
like,
really?
Flat out.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I vote kind of based on value to your team, your pure production, and what you've led your team to in terms of overall team success. And I tell you what, if Devontae Smith wasn't there, I don't think Mac Jones would be putting up these kind of numbers, or at least numbers that are comparable to Kyle Trask. I just don't think that he would. So the value to Devontae Smith is there. The numbers are just silly, and they're the number one team in the country. And so I think you have to put him. Like, let's just say you took Mac Jones off that team. I still think Bryce Young would be fine because he'd find a way to get Devontae Smith a ton, right? And they'd still be a top 4 team and still in the playoff race. And so I would put him number one. I think Kyle Trask, he's putting up numbers better than Joe Burrow, which is impressive beyond belief. And then I put Mac number 3. And you're right. The more Devontae Smith, kind of climbs up that ladder, the less likely it is that either him or Mac Jones wins the Heisman Trophy because they just split their votes. And look, the Inside Baseball, we get 3 votes. Like 3 people we put on our ballots.
Yep.
I wouldn't mind putting 2 players from the same team on mine, but I think that a lot of those other voters, they would have a problem with that, especially considering, some of the voters that get Heisman Trophy votes, they don't even work in sports anymore.
Yeah, right.
Right? Like they've moved on and work in PR or whatever, and they still have maintained a vote. So and those guys especially, I think, would have a hard time putting 2 players from the same team on.
So does that open the door for Kyle Trask to win in a way that a lot of people aren't thinking about? Because,
yes.
Kyle Pitts, who's obviously incredibly talented, and that could be a talking point. People say, well, Kyle Trask got Kyle Pitts. Agreed. But he also put up the same numbers without Kyle Pitts for the 2 games that Kyle Pitts missed, plus the part of the game that he missed against Georgia. So there's pretty strong evidence that Kyle Trask's numbers were going to be phenomenal. Certainly he's helped by having a top 10 caliber NFL draft pick, which I would imagine Devontae Smith will be as well. Kyle Pitts a tight end as opposed to Devontae Smith a wide receiver. But I think that's what would distinguish Pitts from Smith.
Yeah, 100%. Because, like you said, we've seen Kyle Pitts play. He's great, but we've seen Kyle Trask play without Kyle Pitts, and he's really the drop off wasn't there. And again, that's not a slight against Kyle Pitts. Kyle Pitts is awesome, but it's a compliment to what Kyle Trask has become. And I 100% agree with you. And then beyond that, I think it's just hard to make a case for Zach Wilson. Trevor Lawrence deserves to be discussed, but he missed those games, not only the 2 from COVID, but the one that was canceled by Florida State. And Justin Fields hadn't played that much, which, it sucks for both of those guys because they deserve recognition, obviously, but it's just the way that the chips have fallen this year.
We're talking to Barrett Sallee, and obviously there's been a lot of discussion about the Big Ten. I just asked you about it. Pac-12, it's like nobody even talks about the Pac-12. Even though we got USC, UCLA playing on Saturday, even though USC is still undefeated, it's like they don't matter. But I will say this. I think we are underrating what an incredible job the SEC, the ACC, and the Big 12 have done this season. All 3 of those conferences are going to crown champions, Barrett. They're going to do it without any, asterisks associated with that decision at all. Arguably, you can say, for instance, in the SEC, Alabama or Florida would be the most accomplished SEC champion of all time because they will play 11 conference games. And I feel like in many ways we are underrating how stellar their performance has been to get all of this done.
Yeah, with all the COVID stuff and players out, and they lost their coach for a game, and almost lost him for another game. And really, I don't think we give that enough credence because he was out for 3 days before the Georgia game. So yeah, it really is remarkable, and I think it goes to show you that knee-jerk reactions like what the Big Ten and the Pac-12 have done have really damaged those conferences far beyond this year, I think. Because recruits take notice of the importance of football, and clearly in those two conferences it's not as important, and that's why before all this started, I think there was this idea like, oh, is the national championship going to get an asterisk next to its name? And the answer is, well, yeah, hell yeah, it is, but that's not a criticism. That's a point of pride. If you were able to play all these games, navigate through all of this, and not only win a national championship, but in likely somebody's case, do it undefeated. That's the most impressive national championship of all time. Like, I really believe that. It's almost impossible to do that. So, yeah, those three conferences deserve it, but those teams too, especially the teams that have gone about, navigated through this, through all kinds of issues, really deserve more. It deserves more attention than people are actually giving it.
Is LSU putting itself on probation before a bowl game that nobody at LSU would want to play in and that no LSU fans would want to go to, one of the greatest SEC penalties of all time?
Yes. Yes, it is. It's based. I'd like to self-impose a ban on my hairline ever growing back. Like, it's not coming back anyway. I mean, it is. Look, it was going to happen. For those that don't know about that story with the hospital and funneling money through it, it's pretty bad. And so they were going to get banned. I don't think there's any doubt. If they were competitive this year, certainly they'd kick the can down the road a little bit. But they were going to have to self-impose a bowl ban and to make themselves look like they're doing something in front of the NCAA's eyes. And the season rolled the way it did, and you go ahead and say you're not going because there is no bowl minimum this year. I think some people might have forgotten about that, so they would have gone to a bowl, maybe Shreveport or something. But it's hilarious. It's essentially saying, hey, we suck. Our players don't want to be here anymore. We're not going to play after next weekend. We're
talking to Barrett Sallee. Last question for you. CBSSports.com. You can go read him there. Would you take Alabama to win the national championship or the other 5 teams that are really strongly in the mix? And I can throw Cincinnati and whoever else you would want in that mix that you think could potentially make the playoff. Basically, Alabama or the field right now.
I think Alabama's going to win it, but I'd take the field.
Because
if I'm getting Clemson, if I'm getting Notre Dame, if I'm getting Florida, if I'm getting Ohio State, those are really good football teams. So, yeah, I'd take the field. Again, I think Alabama will win it, but if we're talking about gambling, if I'm getting all those teams, absolutely I'm taking those teams.